A lot of times people ask, what can I expect from active duty in the United States Army? Well, I got some things to kind of break down, from fitness tests to 24-hour duty and all sorts of other things, so that way you know what to expect when you join the Army for active duty. What's up, my friends? Welcome to a brand new video. In this one, I'm specifically kind of helping you understand some things about active duty. Now, there is some stuff that I will go over for like the day-to-day as far as what you can expect for the day-to-day life on active duty. I'll cover that a little bit later, but I want to start off with talking about 5 specific things, right? Because the day-to-day life can vary, and oftentimes, but these 5 things, every soldier in the United States Army that is on active duty is going to have to experience these 5 things. So I want to start off with something really strong that you know that you will have to do, so you know what to expect from active duty. On active duty, you do have a fitness test, and while you do still have the fitness test in the reserves and National Guard, it's going to be really strict kind of as far as the enforcement of it on active duty, where depending on the unit on the reserves and National Guard side, maybe they're kind of like, you know, skirting the line a little bit, or kind of doing some things that maybe they have to bend a few rules here and there because of how the planning kind of works. But on active duty, typically, they're going to be pretty strict on this fitness test. As of recording this video, the current fitness test is the Army Fitness Test, all right, the AFT. And that fitness test has to be done at least every 6 months. But there are some cases where you will possibly do that fitness test more than every 6 months. You might do it every 3 months, every 2 months. A lot of it depends on the leadership and the unit and kind of things that are kind of going on. Because you might have a situation where, sure, you're not due for another fitness test for another 5 months out or something like that, 4 months out, whatever. But the unit is trying to get everybody compliant, because there are some people that are overdue or close to overdue or whatever the case is. So they're saying, hey, next week we're doing a fitness test, so everybody has to participate in that, whether you're current or not. Because it's not a thing where you're like, oh, I'm not due for a fitness test until July of this year, right? It doesn't work that way, right? It's gonna be a thing where they're gonna make sure that you should be doing one every 6 months, but there's a lot of times we're gonna be doing it more often than that because of how they kind of schedule it and have you doing those fitness tests. So you may already know that you have to do that fitness test, of course, right? If you've probably been doing your homework and learning about the Army, you're thinking about joining the Army or whatever, you know that you have a fitness test. I just don't want you to go into it thinking that, oh, it's only due every 6 months, so you just have to make sure to do it before then. Now, they usually have them scheduled, and there could be some cases where you might be doing one every 3 months or something like that, just because of how the scheduling falls. Also, additionally, with that fitness test, that's also when they're doing height and weight to check your weight and how tall you are. That way it kind of allocates, you know, what are you allowed based on your height and your age and everything else like that. There is a regulation, AR 600-9, that does cover like a lot of these standards for how that height and weight goes, how the fitness standards go. But just know that typically after you do that fitness test, they're gonna do height and weight. If you are over that weight threshold based on your age and your height, then they have to do a tape test, which is where they kind of check your body fat percentage to see if you're within a certain criteria, because sometimes you could be not really overweight as in like obese, but like over the allowed weight because you're very muscular. So they have to kind of check to see, hey, are you over that allocated weight because you're muscular, or is it because of fat? So you also have to expect that typically after a fitness test. In the Army, you're gonna be drug tested. This has to be done actually once a year at least, but you're gonna find cases where we're gonna do it more than just once a year. But by regulation, the unit has to at least conduct one once a year. There have been many times where, like when I was at Fort Carson or when I was at Fort Riley, where there was times where I was doing freaking drug tests, it seemed like every damn month. You know, you would do a drug test one week and it seemed like just a couple days later, the next week or whatever, all of a sudden there's 100%, which means they need to test everybody. Sometimes that comes about because maybe they're suspicious of someone using, you know, some kind of drugs, and they want to try to catch that individual. They need some evidence that, you know, proves that they've been doing drugs because of, you know, people tipping them off or whatever. But there is still that regulation of they have to do it at least once a year. And sometimes just how it falls, it ends up catching you more than once a year, depending on what kind of drug test they're doing. If you're not familiar with the drug testing in the Army, it's just simply you got to pee in a cup, right? They're going to probably tell you last minute. It's not like a thing like, you know, like civilian employers typically do, saying, hey, on Wednesday you got to go down to this medical facility to do a drug test, or tomorrow or whatever. No, it's usually like wake you up in the morning, you know, in the barracks, or you show up to fitness, you know, in the morning for PT, and they say, hey, These people step off to the side and you find out you're doing a drug test, so you don't usually get like a heads up. There might be some cases where you might get a heads up, but typically they don't want to give you a heads up because they don't want to allow you to kind of prepare if you are using drugs. So they try to like catch you by surprise, and they have everybody go inside and you can't leave until you do pee in the cup. And they always threaten that like possibly they could take you to hospital and draw blood. I don't know if I've actually ever seen that. Typically they just have some people that are just kind of stuck all day trying to wait to go to the bathroom and pee, and then they have to eventually pee, and they drink a bunch of water, and they pee in the cup, and then they're done with the drug test. With those drug tests, probably not gonna hear anything back. If you do hear something back, it's maybe because you failed, and that's bad, right? So you probably don't want to hear anything back after that drug test. So you're not gonna get any kind of results afterwards saying, hey, you're good. You just hope that you don't hear anything, because if you don't hear anything, that means you probably passed, because they don't just send out the results for everybody. They typically send out the results of, hey, these people failed the drug test. But expect it at least once a year, but there's a lot of cases where you'll do it a lot more often than once a year. On active duty in the United States Army, you're gonna be going to the field. You're gonna have to go out in the field for, sometimes it could just be as short as like 3 days, but in some cases it could be as long as a month. How often this happens kind of just depends on the tempo of the unit, right? The unit has objectives, things they gotta do, things they gotta prepare for, especially like you're in like a tanker type of unit, right? Well, they probably gotta do gunnery, and other kind of platforms have to do gunnery, like especially like Bradleys and other kind of weapon systems. Then they're gonna probably have to go to the field a little bit more often to be able to do those gunneries. Certain other units may go to the field a little bit less, but you will go to the field eventually at some point in time, right? And how long it's going to the field, this could be just a 3-day field problem. That can sometimes happen where it's just a short little one over the weekend sometimes, right? Or it could be longer ones, like more typical ones. Sometimes it's like a week or 2 weeks long. And then in some cases, it might even be a month long. An example of a field problem that could be like a month long is if you go to the National Training Center, which is in Fort Irwin, California, right? NTC, you may have heard it called. If you have to go to NTC in California, that's typically like about 30 days. I mean, sometimes give or take, but nonetheless, you're gonna be away, gone, doing that kind of field problem for 30 days. I may even pop up a card of a video I did a while back that kind of explains the National Training Center and kind of what happens during that time period, so that way if you are going to NTC, maybe you can kind of learn about that. But just be aware, if you're gonna be on active duty, there are gonna be times where you're gonna be away from home. Like you have a family, if you're a single soldier, right, whatever the case is, then you're gonna be away from whatever it is for 3 days, maybe even a month. And how often just depends on the unit. But for my active duty friends out there that are watching this video, let me know down in the comment section down below, how often did you go to the field in your current unit, your last unit, whatever the case is. I've definitely had some units where I went to the field all the time, and sometimes I only went a little bit here and there. So it definitely does vary based on the unit and kind of what you're doing. Active duty individuals sometimes have to do these random classes in the Army. You're gonna have these random things that pop up that are required training that you're gonna have to do periodically. So don't expect that you're always just gonna be doing your job, right? You're infantry, so you're always gonna be practicing clearing rooms and weapons qualification. You're working in HR, you're always gonna be working in an office, working on people's pay and vacation time and awards and stuff like that, right? Not always. Sometimes you have these required training you have to go do or take online sometimes in some cases that has to be done. Sometimes it's a thing at your unit where you're gonna get together in a conference room, in a theater or whatever, you're gonna do some SHARP training, which is essentially like sexual harassment training, right? It's still even required in the military, right? For those of you on the civilian side, you may have to do that at your work. Maybe it's an online class, maybe it's an in-person thing. In the Army, sometimes it varies too. Sometimes it'll be in person, sometimes it's online, but still it's required in the Army too to do that sexual harassment training. There's also a lot of safety things, especially like on Fridays or certain kind of times where they'll do like safety stand down, where you're just kind of like doing a lot of safety classes all day, regardless of your job, just to make sure you're always practicing safe habits and being safe in different environments. There's also a lot of really common ones like online, like OPSEC training, and you have like cybersecurity training type of thing, as far as like how to identify, if you're being like trying to be involved in a phishing scam or some kind of other scams online, or someone's trying to get information out of you. And there's all sorts of things. There's a lot of that stuff that's like required, and you have to do it every 6 months, every 3 months, every year, whatever the case is. And you'll sometimes dedicate that time saying, hey, on Thursday we have this training going on, or hey, I need everybody to get this training done before Friday, and maybe you'll take some time out to go use the computers at the library, at home, whatever you got to do to get this training knocked out. So you're going to have this mandatory training that's going to be required just randomly, here and there, all the time, all sorts of random little training classes you'll have to conduct. Sometimes in the Army, you're going to have to pull 24-hour duty, especially that's going to be a thing like on active duty. Probably not so much on Reserves and National Guard. Maybe sometimes it happens, but definitely on active duty, you have to pull 24 hours of duty, of sitting at a desk, doing some kind of work for 24 hours, which is typically in the form of CQ, which actually stands for change of quarters, but nobody ever calls it that. But CQ, which is sitting at the barracks, or staff duty, which is sitting at like the unit's headquarters building. And you're just there. It's you and probably maybe two other individuals, two other soldiers, maybe a non-commissioned officer and two lower enlisted soldiers that are there. Maybe it's one non-commissioned officer and one lower enlisted soldier. Just kind of depends on the unit, but you're there often from maybe it's like 7 in the morning till 7 in the morning the next day, or 9 in the morning till 9 in the morning next day, but it's for 24 hours. There are a lot of units I have seen, I don't know about a lot, but there are some units that I have seen where they are trying to make it to where it's mandatory that soldiers get at least like 4 hours of sleep. So they may have some kind of implementation where at some point in the night, one of the soldiers takes a little 4-hour nap, comes back, relieves the other soldier, they go take a 4-hour nap. That way they're not having to do the full 24 hours. But I will say that not every unit is doing that. There are some units that are doing that, but not all. And this is the thing you might have to do maybe every other month. It kind of just depends on how many individuals are in your unit, because they usually try to rotate through all the soldiers, probably alphabetical or however they're kind of doing it at the unit, where one soldier has to go and pull CQ at the barracks. Even if they don't live in the barracks, it doesn't matter if you live in the barracks, you still end up getting stuck doing CQ too. But how often you do it just kind of usually depends on how many people there is to kind of rotate through, because they'll rotate through them and then probably goes back around, and you may get it every 3 months, every 2 months. If you have a small unit, maybe you got it every month, right? It just kind of depends on how many people are at your unit. But nonetheless, you're going to possibly, most likely, have to pull 24 hours of duty either at CQ or staff duty. Now, for the day-to-day. The day-to-day can definitely vary based on your MOS, based on your unit, based on a lot of factors. But there are some things I can guarantee, or not really guarantee, but give you a good gist of, all right? You're probably gonna have to do fitness in the morning, right? That typically starts at 6:30 in the morning until 7:30, 8. Now, after you do physical fitness, right, ends, like I said, 7:30, 8, you have a little bit of time to eat breakfast, to go change, to go shower and do everything, and then typically you're to wherever you need to be at 9. From 9 till about 11:30, 12, typically doing whatever it is you need to do during that day, whatever your job is, whatever has to go on, whatever, taking care of that during that time frame, and then you break for lunch. So you get roughly an hour, hour and a half, maybe sometimes a little bit longer, right, for lunch, and then at 1 or 1300, you usually have to be back to continue doing whatever it was you were doing. And then that'll carry on till 4:30, 5. A lot of times it depends on the unit, right? Because if I say 4:30, I say 5, there's gonna be some people in the comments saying, I never got off work at 5. And sure, sometimes that can happen. And usually it's not all the time, but there are times where you have to work a little bit later. Maybe you have to work until 7, 8, 9, 12 o'clock at midnight, whatever. A lot of times it depends on what's going on, especially like if you're prepping for the field, prepping for a deployment, there's a lot of busy things going on, then sure, though there's no guaranteed you're getting off at this time. It's typically, maybe if, a perfect environment, not a whole lot's going on, 4:35, you're getting off work, but there are scenarios that adjust that to be much farther and you don't get off at that time. And that can vary based on your unit or your MOS, so down in the comment section down below as well, some of my active duty friends that are watching this, let me know, what was your MOS? What was the average time when you're not like trying to go to the field or going on a deployment that you typically got off of work? For me, for example, usually 4:30, 5, there are times where it'll go much later because of what we're doing, but if there wasn't anything crazy going on, 4:35, we're usually getting off. Now, when it comes to the day-to-day life in the Army, you may want to compare that to what it's like on the civilian side. What are the pros and what are the cons? Well, I have a video right here that you can actually watch that explains that and breaks it down, so go check that out next. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.